Hi, I'm Femi Oke and you're in the stream. Today, is Israel moving towards a Palestinian-free Knesset? We look at the controversy surrounding a new bill called the Suspension Law and why some Palestinian members say it targets them and undermines the democratic rights of minorities in the country. There are debates where our online community is split, and there are debates when this doesn't happen. Digital producer Malika Bilal, which debate are we in today?
This one is definitely not split. It's pretty one-sided. There are some people who are offering a little bit of nuance, just a little dash. This is Noam. He's one of those. He says Israel has many important mechanisms to protect minority views, yet we've seen many efforts in recent years to weaken those. And he goes on to say, we can't ignore how the bill that we're talking about on today's show is perceived by Israel's Arab minority, that they're not welcome. So we want you to weigh in whichever side of the debate you fall on. Use the hashtag AJStream.
Hi, my name is Ran Bar Yoshafat. I'm a lawyer and an Israeli activist, and I'm in the stream.
The Israeli parliament, or the Knesset, recently passed the first stage of a new legislation called the MK Suspension Law, which would give Knesset members, also known as MKs, the ability to suspend a fellow member with a 3/4 majority. The suspension law was pushed forward after 3 Israeli Palestinian MKs visited the families of Palestinians killed during attacks against Israelis. Some reports allege the MKs wanted to give their condolences, but the MKs fired back at the allegations, saying the purpose of their meeting was to perform their duty to help families to return the bodies of their children, which the Israeli authorities hold contrary to international laws and values. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who initiated the bill, says that it's meant to remove MKs who stand against Israel and for terrorism. That's a direct quote from him. But Israeli Palestinian MKs say this legislation seeks to silence views that are critical of the state and undermine the democratic rights and political representation of minorities. To help us explore this debate taking place in Israel, we are joined by Yousef Jabareen. He's a member of the Israeli Knesset and the founding director of the Arab Center for Law and Policy. Haviv Rettig Gur is a senior analyst at the Times of Israel newspaper. Neve Gordon, author of Israel's Occupation and the Human Right to Dominate, and Soheir Asaad, a Palestinian activist. You also served for 3 years as an MK clerk. It's good to have you here, everybody. Yousef, I was just thinking, with the MKs going to visit Palestinian families during this very sensitive time, were they deliberately trying to provoke a reaction? Did they have any idea the kind of reaction that they might get?
Definitely not. I mean, the main idea was here that my colleagues are reaffirming not just their rights as MKs, but also their duties toward our community, and we thought that this is very integral part of our duty as a representative of the community. This is a very humanitarian issue. And I would say that, we didn't expect such a harsh reaction to this activity. Again, this is something that was also coordinating with the relevant minister in the government. The idea was also to convey to him the message from the Palestinian family and to try, to do our best in order to advance the return of the death bodies for the Palestinian family. So I asked myself if we, as a member of the parliament, can't do such cannot deal with these issues. So what we are doing in the parliament. So it's clear to me that Netanyahu basically is exploiting this meeting in order basically to continue his attacks against the leaders of the Arab community and his attacks on Israeli democracy in general.
You know, Haviv, the view that Yousef just put forward, that the MKs were doing their duty, it's one we are seeing online. I want to share with you these tweets from someone who says the joint list MKs, the ones that we're talking about here, were sent to negotiate the return of the bodies and then vilified for doing just that. They were the go-between, coordinating between the Minister of Information and the Palestinian families. And she ends by saying the fact that the Ethics Committee responded so quickly stinks of some kind of entrapment. What do you make of that argument that they were, as Yousef said, doing their duties, but then were caught into this web of what she says is entrapment?
I don't know. I mean, the event had a tremendous amount of theater around it. They stood silent. They were respectful of these people. Look, these are people who set out to murder Jews. These are people who set out to murder Israelis. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict writ large is not something that you think about day to day in this region, not Palestinians and not Israelis. You think about your immediate experience, and the immediate experience is that these people are murderers or attempted murderers. There's only so much you can expect the population that they're targeting to understand when there are photos coming out of them standing silently in respect of these young people. So there's a little bit of a game being played here over who sent them and why they sent. You know, there is among some Arab lawmakers in the Knesset, among many this is not true, but among some of them there is just explicit and open understanding and just on the borderline of support for these attacks, for the stabbings that are meant to kill. So
Haviv,
you have to also ask yourself what you can expect from the Jews.
Can I ask Haviv a question? So if a member of Senate in the United States would have supported the black people in Ferguson, and suddenly the majority would have come and says anyone that supports the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States should be suspended, would you back that?
No.
I mean,
think that if a
people
member
were
of
rioting in Ferguson, people were
I would
rioting
not
in Baltimore, there was violence.
Sure, to your question, I would not back a member of the Congress who says that they back a movement for rights. I would consider, by the way, in American law, it's allowed. The Congress can suspend a member of Congress almost for any reason, much more than in Israel. But I would maybe back that kind of consideration if they backed people who set out to kill civilians. If that was something that a member of Congress...
The last time Congress suspended someone from the Senate was in 1862 because they were Democrats and supported the Confederates. I mean,
you mean on principled issues? Someone was suspended in 2002, but it was for corruption.
From Congress, not from the Senate, and it was for corruption.
So, gentlemen, so this brings me
for ideological reasons, it was very different, which was in 1862, the last suspension.
Right, so gentlemen, let me bring this up
to... Knesset, one sentence and I'm done. How many members of Knesset have been prevented from running for Knesset because they don't support the Jewish state as a Jewish state, which is current Israeli law? The only party ever actually outlawed under current Israeli laws in the Knesset, you're talking about the difference between rules and reality. The only party ever actually outlawed by Israeli law is the right-wing Jewish racist party Kahana Chai. None of the rules of this bill are going to change the current reality. You even need approval of the High Court of Justice.
All right, so Haviv and Neve, let me just bring in Soheir here. Guess, just take a pause for a minute, because I want to bring in Soheir here. For the international community, Soheir, how do you understand this suspension bill? What will it actually do if it passes?
Actually, the suspension law is not a new attempt. I heard Haviv before saying that there is nothing new that this law is bringing. And I think this law is not bringing anything new also, but it's not bringing anything new from the previous attempts to limit the Palestinian representative political rights and the rights to represent their community. And actually, this law is going to give the legislature the majority of Israeli Knesset member that is already hostile to Palestinian Knesset member, unlimited power to suspend a member of Knesset who is already a member. This is added to the basic Knesset basic law that will disqualify.
So they can suspend them from, just helping us out here so everybody understands it, suspend them from supporting terrorism and being racist.
Suspend them from being part of the Knesset. And actually, the words in the law are not terrorism. It's inappropriate conduct. And I wonder, what is this inappropriate conduct? Such a wide term that can be used for anything to ensure political persecution of Palestinian leadership. And just to make sure, first of all, the information that Haviv brought is not right related to the disqualification. The Armed Movement was disqualified, not only the Kahana political party. And the other thing that the disqualification law that is in the basic law was used in the history only against Palestinian political parties beside the racist Kahana political party. And in every election, Palestinian individual candidates or lists are disqualified, and the High Court changed the decision. And
Soheir, I just want to jump in right there because you mentioned something that I want to bring our community in on. You talked about the wording of this being about inappropriate conduct. So who decides what that is? Who gets to determine that? There's an interesting conversation here. This is Noam. He says the apparent target is the Arab minority, but other minorities, including the ultra-Orthodox and the radical right, might end up in the crossfire. On the other hand, though, that gets a little bit of pushback. And Yousef, I'll direct this to you. This is Simon, and he says, it's difficult to believe that this is going to be applied against anyone other than Palestinian MKs. How accurate do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, sure. It's clear that the only scenario that this law could be used is only when Palestinian MKs are targeted. I think this is the only scenario that you could get 3/4 of MKs supporting that, and this is exactly the dangers of this law because it's targeting the minority groups. So far, the Joint List, which is the representative of the Palestinian community in Israel, are only 13 members out of the 120 members, which means that there is any agreement between the coalition and some parties from the opposition, it would be easy for the coalition to get to 90 members of the Knesset to support that. So I think it's clear what's the idea behind this law. It's important for me to emphasize here that even if the law wouldn't be implemented in the ground, in the immediate future, the mere fact that there is a tool for MKs, for right-wing party, to use it to attack Arab MKs all the time, it will create an atmosphere of basically targeting the political activity of the Arab MKs, and basically it's telling them that and telling us that our membership of the Knesset is a conditional membership, and it depends on good behavior. If we behave good according to the government, we will be okay in the parliament. However,
Yousef,
if we do any activity that it might be seen as an extreme activity, we will be targeting, and many MKs will initiate the process of suspending. It's not just suspending; it's basically expelling Arab MKs from the Knesset because according to the law, there is the authority to suspend the MKs for the entire term, which means basically expelling him or her from the Knesset, which is obviously go against the fact that we were elected by the support of our community. We got the legitimacy of our membership.
So, Yousef, I know Haviv wants to have this conversation with you. Haviv, go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, just, three very quick points. I personally am not sure that I support the bill. It actually has a couple of issues with it that are unique to the democratic world, and I think that maybe should be changed, and maybe it's very important that they should change. But it's important also to understand what is and what isn't in the bill. It does not shrink the representation of the parties that we're talking about. An MK who is suspended, the list that they belong to remains with the same number of seats, and someone takes their slot from their own party. Two really quick points. The second quick point, I'll just do one last point. There is a more important conversation. This bill is not actually, first of all, it might not even pass. It's not at all clear that a 61-member coalition can even pass it. Second of all, most of the right-wing bills in recent years haven't actually passed after the New York Times wrote entire editorials about them, but they never actually passed.
Because why, Haviv? Because why?
Because the Israeli right proposes these bills as part of a populist sort of primaries catering to the base, which is a much more right-wing base than the electorate. And then when they reach the Knesset, these bills are killed. That's true of, there have been about 60 of these right-wing bills, and maybe 3 have passed into law. We had in 2011 a law that makes it illegal to boycott Israeli settlements. Now, a lot of Israelis boycott Israeli settlements. The law has never been challenged in court because when the law finally passed into law in 2011, the bar for evidence was so high because the coalition, the right wing, negotiated to raise that bar so high, the law could never be used.
Actually, there was a Supreme Court appeal against this law, and the Supreme Court appeal failed.
All right, so let me ask you all just to take a pause for a moment because we're going deep into Israeli politics right now. I just want to pull us up just a little bit so we see a big picture here. Let me just see a big picture here. So here, you've worked as a clerk for an MK. In fact, one of the MKs who went to see Palestinian families who are trying to get the bodies of their sons back. So you have a lot of experience in the Knesset. How effective are Israeli Palestinians in the Knesset? What influence do they have?
First of all, just like a quick point related to what Haviv said about the law, and it's connected also to the effectiveness. What he said is that this law is going to suspend only individuals, and it's going to the list will be still representative. What the law is doing is to monitor the behavior of individuals, and the majority will decide who of the Palestinian Knesset member behave well and works with small politics that is related to daily issues of Palestinian.
So Soheir, and between Soheir and Yousef and Neve, I understand the point that you're making. Yeah, I'm curious as to what is that atmosphere like in the Knesset with this small group of Israeli Palestinians. How impactful are they?
So to link it with the expectation issue, a Palestinian Knesset member can introduce a law to the Knesset, and this law cannot pass just because he's a Palestinian, even if this law will serve the whole not only Palestinian society, but the whole population in Israel. A Palestinian Knesset member would go to a committee in the Knesset to deal with, for example, issues related to women's rights and education, and will be shut down and called terrorist, despite the fact that he's dealing with totally civilian issues of daily life of Palestinians. There is an expectation of Palestinian Knesset member to be well behaved and to deal only with daily issues. And when they deal with daily issues, they are shut down. Their laws are not passing. They are called terrorists. And this is a targeting of the representative of the Palestinian representative as part of the targeting of the whole population. The same thing we hear in the street, Palestinian Knesset member hear from the representative of the majority.
So here, there's someone here that agrees with you. This is Ronald. He says Israeli Palestinians comprise about 20% of the population, yet they have shortfalls of budget allocations and governmental investments. And Neve, there is a reason for that, one community member tells us. This is Ben White. He explains that this is part of a pattern. I want you to have a listen to what he told us.
Well, this bill is the latest in a wave of anti-democratic nationalist legislation targeting the small amount of political representation that is afforded Palestinian citizens of Israel. But let's also remember some context. Israel never has been a democracy for non-Jewish citizens, dating back from the military regime for Palestinian citizens that lasted until 1966, all the way through to today, where there are dozens of discriminatory laws on the statute books.
What do you make of Ben's comments on Israel not being a democracy and this definitely not helping that? Neve?
Well, I agree and disagree. I think that Israel has supreme authority over the territory from the Jordan Valley to the Mediterranean Sea, and within that territory, there's different gradations of democracy for different people. For me, as Ben White would agree, it's a full democracy, and probably I have more rights than any citizen in the United States or most countries in Europe. I think for Palestinian citizens of Israel, they are a second class. They're fighting something like the civil rights movement in the United States during the 50s and 60s to be recognized as having equal rights in this country, which they don't have. I have a Bedouin village 15 minutes from my home that's going to be destroyed in the next few months, and Jews are gonna move and live exactly where that village is. It's called El Khiran, and these Bedouins are citizens. So no democracy that I know of just uproots part of its citizenry to put a different ethnic group. But then we also have the people in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, which Israel basically has ultimate control over them, and they don't have any rights at all. And in that sense, we have two legal systems in one territory, one legal system that is good for me, and another legal system that is for the Palestinians in the West Bank. And that's what's called in English apartheid.
See, Neve, I want to play something. This is from the Israel's Democracy Institute. And there's some surprising people in this little video clip who actually are against the suspension law. Have a look at this. See, Haviv, Neve was explaining our understanding of the suspension law in the context of relationships between Israeli and Palestinians. How do you understand this bill that's still got some way to go before it becomes law, if it becomes law? What's your bigger context for understanding why it's even being debated right now?
You know, I'm so glad you ran that video, because that video, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Haviv. I said Haviv.
That video proves those people are votes. Without their votes, you can't pass the bill. In other words, that video proves that the Israeli right opposes this bill and it cannot pass. And I said that. And I said that, you know, when people told me I'm wrong. Arab MKs pass bills all the time. Ahmed Tibi has dozens of bills to his name. Just Google it.
Don't exaggerate.
Israel is not a democracy in the West Bank, in the sense that in the West Bank there is an occupation under Israeli law. It's not anti-Israel to say so. Israel doesn't want Palestinians in the West Bank to be Israeli. Palestinians in the West Bank don't want to be Israeli. Hopefully we'll manage to create two states in this region that's still supported by a majority of people, at least aspirationally, on both sides. So let's get all of that stuff, you know, out of the way and talk about the actual issue. The actual issue that's going on here is that there are Arab lawmakers. Never mind if this bill is terrible. Maybe this bill is terrible. It won't pass, so we're good. There are Arab lawmakers.
That's said with confidence there, Haviv.
You know, the bill is very terrible.
90% of these
maybe
bills
I
fail.
support it.
The Arab. There's an important point here. The Arab MKs want to run a nationalist conflict in the Knesset. And the Jewish MKs who proposed this bill want to run that nationalist battle. And it's a losing battle for both sides because the Jews aren't going anywhere.
All right, so Haviv and Neve and Yousef, just give me a pause for a moment. Give me a pause for a moment. I insist, gentlemen, please. Malika Bilal.
You're giving me the last word, so I'll give it to the community.
Penultimate.
Two sides of this debate because it's so heated. One side says this bill demonstrates that political dissent is a right reserved only to Jews, and dissenting Palestinians are to be penalized. On the other side of the debate, Noam says every democracy struggles to protect all of its citizens, and Israel is no exception.
I love it when I hear all of the guests all at one time. I am not shutting them down. I am taking them to the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. But before I do that, I want to tell you that this has been a Aus Haderi production. And like all Aus productions, this one is incredibly memorable. Let's cut to the control room. I want to give the man a bow. There we go. Because this is his last production for the stream. Aus Haderi, we salute you. Thank you so much for being part of the stream team. We are going to miss you, but not yet. We'll squeeze one little bit of production out of him as we go online to stream.aljazeera.com. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. So this is the Streams Online Post Show. We've been talking about the controversy surrounding Israel's MK suspension bill, whether or not it's undermining democratic rights of minorities in the country. Now, I can't quite remember exactly where we left off, but I do remember the volume. Who wants to pick up first? Who was making your
Can I have
Exactly, this is exactly where we left off. Soheir, I will allow you to pick up and then we're going to bounce off the back of whatever you say. Go ahead, Soheir.
Well, I want us to comment on an issue that Haviv mentioned. He said that this is a law that reflects the national battle inside the Knesset. Well, I don't know what's the problem with Palestinian Knesset member dealing with national issues. Palestinian Knesset member are a representative of a national group. They're part of the Palestinian people, and part of what they're doing in the Knesset is to raise the Palestinian victim voice. Beside, of course, dealing with daily issues of education, of employment, and other issues, which they are doing. According to the Abraham Fund, Palestinian Knesset member between 75% to 97% of their conduct deals with Palestinian issues, daily issues, like I said, education and employment. There's always an expectation that Palestinian member of the Knesset would deal with small politics, while Israeli member of the Knesset are allowed to talk about occupation, are allowed to have racist statement, while Palestinians are punished for this. I want to remind you about the decision of the Ethics Committee. The longest punishment in the history of the Ethics Committee that is supposed only to deal with behavior of Knesset member inside the Knesset was against MK Hanin Zobi, a Palestinian member of the Knesset. And this tool that is supposed to be only about behavior inside the Knesset was used for a political persecution of Palestinian leadership. So this
So
law,
where
again,
do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line? This law says that you can get kicked out if 3/4 of lawmakers find that you have incited to racism. By the way, there are right-wing MKs like Bezalel Smotrich who fears that he will get kicked out of the Knesset over racism and opposes that part of this bill, of the far right.
Habib, you ignore the fact.
That's the part that's
Habib,
bad.
You
Israel is
ignore
a
the
Jewish
fact
state.
that the Israeli criminal law today specify, these felonies that if they are committed by MKs, they could be basically expelled from the Knesset. So basically, and this is what's acceptable in democracies in the world, that if there is an indictment, in a criminal case, that the judgment is by the court, though that would basically allow the suspension of the member of the Knesset. But not according to what this law proposed, that the decision will be made by our colleagues in the same Knesset. I have to tell you here, I mean, I'm sure that there will be no majority to expel any MKs from the right wing. The only majority that you could have for expelling an MK is only when Palestinian MKs are targeted. And there's an important thing about the national discourse here. There is, we have to emphasize that the real reason for this bill is to silence MKs from doing with issues related to the occupation.
Okay, Yousef,
Netanyahu is basically willing to silence any opposition.
All
to
right,
his
so
basically
Yousef,
plan
Neve is
keep
trying to
the
talk to you.
Palestinians.
Neve, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yousef, don't you think that actually Habib touched the nerve in the last words he says? He said, this is a Jewish state. And I think that is the nerve that this bill is trying to touch, and that's why it's getting so much reaction. I think what the Palestinian Knesset members are struggling for is basically a state for all its citizens, where Palestinians have equal rights like Jews. And I think what Haviv he's not willing to go along that road with you. He would like it to be a Jewish state where Jews actually have more rights than Palestinians.
That's everything you said I agree with, until the last part. Everything you said I agree with. This is a debate over the nature of Israel, over whether the Jews get to have their own nation state.
Exactly.
That's the debate. Everything else is fluff.
I opened this
What's the meaning
discussion
of
by
their own
saying
nation
So
that
state?
we
this
What's
is
the
agree.
meaning?
All right, so guess let
conditional
me just do
membership
one
in
at a
the
time.
Knesset.
Yousef, go ahead, and then Soheir, I'll bring you back in.
No, I just said that I opened my statement in this discussion. I said that this is, conditional membership in the Knesset depending on good behavior, and who decides the good behavior? It's basically Netanyahu and his government. So clearly it's another attempt by basically this government to strengthen the Jewishness of the state of Israel and to silence any discussion about real political freedoms in Israel and real freedom of expression, but
Yusuf, they
also
couldn't
to
even
silence
pass the
any
nation
discussion
state
about the
bill.
occupation.
They couldn't even pass the nation state bill. That's just a bill that
That's
declares that Israel's a Jewish state,
no,
nothing more.
that's a
They
different
couldn't even
story.
pass
No,
that in 3 Knessets.
but
But
this one
I
is
don't
supported
understand
by
why you're
Netanyahu
telling what
himself. And that's
So was that one. He
Netanyahu.
even had his own
No,
version.
Netanyahu himself is
All
behind
right, guys,
that,
let me just make a
and
little bit
he
of
wants.
space for Malika in the
he wants-
community. Malika, go ahead.
Sorry.
Earlier, Haviv, you were talking about this being about the nature of the state. There are some thoughts on that. This is Noah. She sent us a video comment. This is what she had to say.
So this bill needs to be understood within the context of the shrinking limits of dissent that the state allows Palestinians and the ways in which the state, in fact, penalizes Palestinians, either for a Facebook like or for actual not towing the party line, even if it's a Palestinian member of the Knesset within a Zionist party.
So Yousef, following up on that, we tweeted out the article that you wrote not too long ago for The Guardian, in which the title of it was "Silencing Arab Members of the Knesset Would Be a New Low for Israeli Democracy." We got a response to that. This is Thelween, and she says, "New low? Arab MKs are just tokens with no power. They exist to prop up the illusion of democracy where none exists." What do you make of her comment? Because that's you she's talking about.
Well, I would say, as Palestinian members of the Knesset, we have always been in the opposition. We're actually the real opposition in Israel. I am aware of this argument about being, talking for, Israeli democracy. However, I have to say that our representation in the parliament is part of our resistance. It's part of our struggle to have equal rights in the country, and we have our legitimacy not from Israeli democracy. We have our legitimacy from our people, from our community who support us, and we represent them in the international community. We also represent their voices and their demands. So it's not about talking to Israeli democracy. It's just the opposite. It's basically to actually to speak about the
Yousef.
anti-democratic trends within Israeli society and within the Israeli policies.
Yousef, Haviv says this bill is not even going to pass. Do you feel it's going to pass?
I feel, unfortunately, that it's going to pass. I feel that there's a majority for this bill. There's another question when it will be used. But even if it's not will be used in the near future, there is this chilling effect of this bill that will limit basically the political maneuver of the Arab MKs, and they will limit their option. It will be also a tool to target them whenever though they do any activity that contradict the Jewish consensus in Israel.
I'm just wrapping up the conversation. Neve, will this bill be passed?
I don't know if it will be passed, but I think I agree with Yousef that in a way, it has already accomplished its effect, and its effect is to silence. And basically, what's going on now is about how we're going to take this party that managed to get 15 seats in the Knesset and delegitimize them and silence them. And that's part of this puzzle is this bill. It's a much bigger picture, but this bill already has had that effect.
So, hey, what's your gut telling you about this bill? Will it become legislation?
I think I don't know, again, as Neve said, and I don't think also this is the important question, if it will pass or not. What is important, in my point of view, is that this bill is supposed to set limits for the accepted behavior of Palestinian members of the Knesset and of their communities. Now, for a Palestinian Knesset member, it's not enough to get elected and get their legitimacy from their community. Now they have to get legitimacy from the majority. And I don't agree with Haviv. Haviv said that right-wing Knesset members are afraid. Well, we're not in Switzerland. We are in Israel, in a reality of privilege for Jews and privilege for Knesset members of the majority, where no one of these Knesset members who called, one of them is the Minister of Education, who said that killing Arabs is okay. The Minister of Justice, who said that, who called Palestinian kids small snakes, and other Knesset members. None of them was punished by the Ethics Committee. None of them was disqualified in the election committee. And we have to acknowledge this context, and from there to analyze how the chilling effect of this law and how it's going to use if it passes.
Soheir and Neve and Haviv and Yousef, thank you so much for helping us understand this from your perspective a whole lot better than we did at the beginning of our show. Take care, everybody. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.